The merciless Montana sun beat down on Sarah Mitchell's back as she leaned her weight against the weathered leather harness. Sweat stung her eyes, and her calloused hands trembled with exhaustion. The plow barely cut into the unyielding soil of what was supposed to be her family's salvation, 40 acres of land that had become her prison since her father's passing 3 months ago. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking with desperation. "Just a little more." At 22, Sarah's slender frame wasn't built for this work. Her once neat brown hair hung in damp tendrils around her face, and her faded blue dress was patched in a dozen places. The dress had been her Sunday best once, back in Pennsylvania, before her father had sold everything they owned to chase the promise of free land out west. Now it was just another reminder of all she had lost. From the ridge overlooking her struggling homestead, Ethan Blackwood sat motionless on his dun-colored horse. With his weathered hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the sun, he watched the young woman's futile battle with the unforgiving earth. His face, partially obscured by a dark beard streaked with premature gray, betrayed no emotion, but his eyes, sharp and observant despite the pain that haunted them, missed nothing. Ethan had been riding the boundaries of what remained of his family's once vast cattle operation when he first spotted the column of smoke from the small homestead's chimney. He hadn't expected to find a woman working alone. In his 35 years on the frontier, he had seen plenty of broken dreams and abandoned homesteads. Most newcomers lasted 1 winter before giving up or dying. This woman would be no different. It wasn't his concern. Nothing much had been his concern in the 3 years since he'd returned from the war to find his wife and young son buried behind their ranch house, victims of a fever that had swept through the territory while he was fighting battles that suddenly seemed meaningless. As Sarah collapsed to her knees, finally defeated by exhaustion, Ethan's hand tightened on his reins. His horse shifted beneath him, sensing his tension. For a brief moment something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of a suffering that matched his own. Then his expression hardened once more. He had his own burdens. The woman would either survive or she wouldn't. It wasn't his place to interfere with fate's cruel hand. The next morning, Ethan returned with a cart carrying a sturdy plow and seed. He found Sarah already harnessed to her makeshift plow, determination etched on her exhausted face. "Mom," he said, his voice rough from disuse. Sarah tightened her grip on the rifle she kept nearby. "State your business." Ethan dismounted and revealed the plow and seeds. When she protested about charity, he placed a crude contract on the ground. Labor exchange, equipment and seed for help with cattle branding. 3 days' work when called. "Who are you?" she asked, suspicion battling with need. "Ethan Blackwood, ranch north of here." His words were clipped, as if each one cost him something to speak. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she finally said, "and I can work. I'll pay my debts." 3 weeks later, Sarah's field showed the first promising green shoots breaking through the soil. The horse Ethan had left, an older but gentle mare she privately named Hope, had been her only companion during the long days of planting. When Ethan arrived to collect on her debt, Sarah quickly changed into the sturdiest clothes she owned, her father's altered trousers and a faded flannel shirt. The ride to his ranch took most of the day, revealing a proper establishment with a large main house, several outbuildings, and lush grazing land stretching toward distant mountains. At the ranch, she met Jake, the silver-haired foreman, and Miguel, the younger cook, who greeted her with an easy smile. "Don't mind the boss," Miguel told her after Ethan disappeared into the main house. "He's been that way since—" He trailed off, exchanging a look with Jake. Later, Miguel explained in hushed tones, "Before Mrs. Blackwood and the little one passed, 3 years back now, fever took them while the boss was away fighting in the war." He crossed himself. "When he came home to find them gone, something in him just broke." The branding work was grueling. By midday, Sarah's arms ached from wrestling reluctant calves, her lungs burned from the dust, and her ears rang with the constant bawling of cattle, but she refused to slow down or complain, aware of Ethan's occasional approving glances. During a brief water break, Ethan surprised her. "Your land, good soil, if you can last the winter." She straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "I will." On the second day, dark clouds rolled in from the west. "Storm coming," Jake announced. "We need to finish what we can and get these cattle settled before it hits." As the storm intensified, a massive gust caught one of the corral gates, tearing it from Jake's grasp. The frightened cattle surged toward the opening with Jake directly in their path. Ethan lunged forward, shoving Jake clear but putting himself in danger. When the animals had cleared, Sarah saw him lying motionless on the ground. They carried Ethan to the main house, a place where time had stopped, with a woman's shawl still draped over a chair and a child's wooden horse on a shelf. Jake cleaned and stitched the gash on Ethan's leg, while Sarah assisted, holding bandages ready and keeping the water clean. "He'll sleep now," Jake said after giving Ethan laudanum. "Should heal clean if infection doesn't set in." "I'll stay," Sarah offered, surprising herself. "You and Miguel need to rest." Through the night, Sarah checked Ethan's temperature and changed the cool cloth on his forehead. Once he stirred and murmured "Clara," his voice filled with such longing that Sarah had to look away. She woke at dawn to find Ethan watching her. "You stayed," he said. It wasn't a question. Jake thought someone should in case of fever. She reached to check his forehead, but he caught her wrist, his grip firm but not painful. For a moment, he simply held her there before releasing her abruptly. "Thank you," he said, the words sounding rusty, as if he hadn't used them in a very long time. Later, Sarah volunteered to ride to town for the doctor. "It's a full day's ride, there and back," Jake warned. "Then I should leave now," she replied simply. As she prepared to depart, Ethan appeared at the door, leaning on a makeshift crutch. "Be careful," he said, something in his tone making Sarah pause. "I will," she promised. Then, with a slight smile, "Try not to get trampled again while I'm gone." The doctor, a harried man named Peterson, returned with Sarah to the ranch. Along the way, he shared stories about the area, including a chilling tale about a young woman who had tried homesteading alone the previous winter. "Found her frozen in her bed come spring thaw," he said solemnly. "That's why Blackwood helping you is so surprising. Man's been a ghost since he lost his family." When they arrived, Miguel met them with relief. "The boss has been impossible. Tried to get up twice and nearly passed out both times." After Dr. Peterson examined Ethan, he prescribed absolute rest for at least 10 days. "That knee needs rest. Absolute rest," he instructed Jake. "Make sure he follows instructions this time." The next morning, Sarah prepared to return to her homestead, but Ethan had one more request. "Jake and Miguel could help. After we finish here, plant the rest of your field." Sarah stiffened. "I don't need charity." "Not charity," he countered. "An exchange. You helped here, we help there." When she hesitated, he added, "Neighbors, that's all." The concept of neighbors, of not being entirely alone, was so unexpected that Sarah found herself blinking back sudden tears. "I'd be grateful," she finally said. "Thank you." With Jake and Miguel's help, the work that would have taken Sarah weeks alone was completed in 2 days. The second field was plowed, fertilized, and planted with the remaining seed. By evening of the second day, Sarah stood at the edge of her property, looking over 2 planted fields and a homestead that now felt more like a home. In the following weeks, Jake or Miguel rode over every few days to check on her progress and lend a hand with heavier tasks. Of Ethan himself, there was no sign, though Jake reported his injuries were healing well. Then, one scorching afternoon, as Sarah was hauling water to her garden, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Ethan himself riding toward her homestead. He sat tall in the saddle, showing only slight stiffness in his right leg. "You shouldn't be riding yet," she said by way of greeting. The corner of his mouth twitched. Doctor said the same. They worked together through the afternoon, finding a rhythm that required few words. As the sun began to lower, Sarah invited him to stay for supper. "Brought something for you," he said, retrieving a small package from his saddlebag. Inside was a book of poetry, not new, but well cared for, its leather binding supple with age. "Clara's," Ethan explained, looking almost embarrassed. "Thought you might enjoy it." Sarah was momentarily speechless. "Ethan, I can't accept this. It's too precious." He shook his head. "Books are meant to be read. Been sitting on a shelf too long." His eyes met hers. "Clara would have liked you, would have wanted you to have it." They shared a simple meal as twilight deepened. The conversation was halting at first, but gradually eased into something approaching comfort. As night fell, Sarah lit the lamp, its warm glow creating an intimate circle around them. "It's getting late," Ethan eventually said. "Should head back." "It's a long ride in the dark," Sarah pointed out. "You could stay. I could make up a pallet by the fire." He conceded with a nod. "If you're sure." In the morning, she woke to find Ethan already up, coffee brewing on the stove. He was sitting at her table, reading from Clara's poetry book. He looked up as she stirred, his face open and unguarded. At the door before leaving, he paused. Sarah. Just her name, but the way he said it held volumes. Yes? When I first saw you trying to pull that plow alone, I thought you were a fool. Thought you'd fail, like all the others. His honesty was brutal but somehow necessary. But you didn't. You kept going. Made me remember something I'd forgotten. What's that? She asked softly. That surviving isn't the same as living. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. Thank you for reminding me. Summer faded into autumn, the days growing shorter as harvest approached. Sarah's crops had flourished beyond her expectations, and with Jake and Miguel's help, she had built a proper storage cellar for the winter. Her relationship with Ethan had deepened through his regular visits, each one longer than the last. They rarely spoke of what was growing between them, but it was there in the lingering glances, the careful touches, the comfortable silences. One crisp October morning, Sarah woke to the sound of hoofbeats. Many hoofbeats. Looking out her window, she saw Ethan approaching with a wagon, followed by Jake, Miguel, and 2 other men she didn't recognize. What's all this? She asked as she stepped outside, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the morning chill. Harvest time, Ethan said simply, but there was a warmth in his eyes that made her breath catch. Brought help. Together they worked through the day, cutting and binding the golden wheat that would see her through the winter. The men Ethan had brought were skilled and efficient, and by sunset her fields were harvested, a task that would have taken her weeks alone. As the others loaded the last of the grain into the wagon to be threshed at Ethan's ranch, he approached Sarah where she stood at the edge of the now empty field. Sarah, he began, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of uncertainty she had never heard before. I have a proposition. She turned to face him, the setting sun painting his features in warm gold and shadow. What kind of proposition? A partnership. He gestured toward her land, then in the direction of his ranch. Your homestead. My ranch. Together. Sarah's heart quickened. Are you asking me to marry you, Ethan Blackwood? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not doing a very good job of it, am I? Actually, she said softly, I think you are. He took her hands in his calloused fingers warm against her skin. I thought I was done with living when Clara and Jamie died, just going through the motions. Then I saw you, this stubborn woman trying to pull a plow by herself, and something woke up inside me. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her wrists. Don't know if I deserve another chance, but if you're willing... Sarah stepped closer, close enough to feel the solid warmth of him. I am. The wedding was small and simple, held in the parlor of Ethan's, now their ranch house, just before the first snow. The local pastor officiated, with Jake, Miguel, and a few neighboring ranchers as witnesses. Sarah wore a new blue dress that Ethan had insisted on ordering from the mercantile in town, and he wore a clean black suit that made him look younger, less weathered. As they exchanged vows, Sarah glanced around the room that had once been Clara's domain. The evidence of the first Mrs. Blackwood remained, the piano in the corner, the books on the shelves, but somehow it no longer felt like a shrine to the dead. Instead, it felt like a home, awaiting new life, new memories. That night, as snow began to fall outside their bedroom window, Ethan held Sarah close, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek in the dim lamplight. Never thought I'd feel this way again, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. Like there's something to look forward to when I wake up. Sarah pressed her palm against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I know for so long it was just about surviving one more day. Now it's about living, he finished for her, bringing her hand to his lips. Winter passed in a blur of quiet contentment. Sarah brought warmth back to the ranch house, filling it with cooking smells and small touches that made it feel lived in again. Ethan began to speak more, sharing stories of his past, of Clara and Jamie, of the war, all the things he had kept locked inside for so long. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled him. In the evenings, they often sat by the fire, while Ethan read aloud from Clara's poetry books, his deep voice giving life to words that had been silent for too long. Sometimes, Sarah would catch him watching her with a look of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. What? She asked one such night, smiling under his gaze. Just thinking, he replied, setting the book aside, about how close I came to riding away that day. Seeing you struggling with that plow and deciding it wasn't my problem. What made you come back? It was a question she had never asked before. Ethan considered for a moment. Couldn't stop thinking about how determined you looked. Reminded me of myself, back when I first started the ranch. He reached for her hand. Think maybe part of me recognized something in you. Someone who wouldn't give up no matter what. Takes one to know one, Sarah said softly, squeezing his fingers. Spring arrived with a burst of new life. The fields around Sarah's old homestead, now part of the expanded Blackwood Ranch, turned green once more. Ethan had hired additional hands to help with the increased cattle operation, and the ranch was slowly returning to its former prosperity. One warm May morning, Sarah stood on the porch, watching as Ethan worked with a new colt in the corral. There was an ease to his movements now, a lightness that had been absent when she first met him. The haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by a quiet contentment that matched her own. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up and smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. He said something to Jake, then made his way toward the house, removing his hat as he approached. "Mrs. Blackwood," he greeted her formally, though his eyes danced with private humor. "Mr. Blackwood," she returned with equal gravity, though she couldn't suppress her own smile. He took her hand and placed it gently over her slightly rounded belly, where their child, the future they had never expected to have, was growing. "How are you feeling today?" "Strong," she answered truthfully. "Ready for whatever comes next." Ethan's expression softened as he pulled her close. "That's what I love about you. Always were." Over his shoulder, Sarah could see her old homestead in the distance, the place where she had once struggled alone against impossible odds. The young woman who had tried to pull the plow by herself seemed like someone from another lifetime, and in a way, she was. That woman had been focused solely on survival. This woman, safe in the arms of a man who had known equal loss and found equal healing, was finally truly living. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, noticing her distant gaze. Sarah smiled up at him. "About how some burdens aren't meant to be carried alone." He nodded, understanding in his eyes, "and how sometimes the people who seem the most broken are the ones who know best how to help others heal." As the sun climbed higher in the Montana sky, they stood together on the porch of the home they had rebuilt, not just the physical structure but the heart of it. Two people who had each tried to pull their own plows, only to discover that some fields are best tended together.